The widespread persecution of religious and ethnic minorities within Iran and non-Shiites in the neighboring countries is at a very disturbing scale. The systematic violation of women's rights, torture, and other cruel and inhuman and degrading treatment and punishment, death penalty, forced displacement, and the other violations, just to name a few, are very much alarming. Moreover, Iran is known for its sectarian agenda and foreign policy of militarism in the region and its interference to the other affairs that threaten violations. Finally, when we talk about minority groups such as Arabs, for example, or the others, Balos, Azeri, Bahai, Hazaras, Pashtuns, to name a few, we unfortunately observing that they are subjected to various violations, including mass killings, torture, and denial of the right to education, and exclusion from healthcare system. Especially Arabs living in Ahwaz region, province of Iran, is the most of the targeted groups. Unfortunately, they have difficulties to access the natural resources, and they are excluded from the workforce, and thus widening economic leverage between Arabs and ethnic Persians. And that is, in the long term, very much affecting generally the interethnic dialogue and coexistence of groups belonging to different ethnicity or religion. The first speaker I have Paula and then Taha. Unfortunately, they didn't join us yet. So therefore, I would like to request Ahmed to start off the discussion and give us a presentation. Ahmed Al-Quraishi is a policy analyst and a researcher and a writer. And thank you so much for joining us today. Please go ahead.
It's always awkward when you know that you have two speakers before you and you're just going through your little presentation on your cell phone and then you're just thrust into the It's always a pleasure and thank you for this opportunity. It's a very important topic. Nearly 2 decades ago, I was a journalist who was working on the remnants of the Japanese Red Army in the Valley of Lebanon, and I was investigating that matter. And I was based for that moment in a Gulf state. And while being there, I was approached. I received a phone call actually, and I was approached by a gentleman who was from Iran, and he requested a meeting. When I met the gentleman, I came to know that he represented an organization I never heard of. The name of that organization was the Ahwaz, the Arabistan Liberation Movement. And I was very intrigued. And he said, and he introduced himself and he said, we're based in a Western country, our organization, and we have amassed arms and weapons for a possible armed conflict in a region called Arabistan. And that region, I was not aware of course, and I came to know then that it was referred to Ahwaz. The reason that these people were organizing themselves is because they felt threatened, both physically and culturally and politically, by the government of Iran. And they basically were preparing for a long struggle. That struggle somehow disappeared at that time. That's when, while working on the remnants of the Japanese Red Army in Lebanon, I shifted my focus really to what's happening in Iran. And it's really very interesting to study this case. Iran is, like many of the nation states in the Middle East, the post-colonial states, is not an integrated nation. It's a nation with many ethnicities and many linguistic groups. It was probably better integrated during the monarchy than it is right now under what I call the mullahcracy, where you have the clerics ruling the country. So it's a very interesting thing. Now, I will address very quickly, Mr. Chair, if you allow me, a key question. Why the rights of non-Persian nations in Iran is an issue now? Why is this an issue? And I'm going to answer this question in the end. But the very fact that the rights of the minorities in Iran is emerging, I would say very openly, and I will not hesitate to say this, that this is a disturbing thing. It's very disturbing for the region. Our region is already burdened by ethnic and linguistic polarization. We've seen what happened in two neighboring countries of Iran, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and of course we're seeing Syria, we're seeing Libya. The fact that Iran is emerging as a case where we have to now discuss the role of the ethnicities and linguistic groups in Iran is a very disturbing thing. It means things are going toward instability, and it's a very serious concern. It should be for all the peoples and nations surrounding Iran. So it's a very disturbing thing. But when you look at it deeply, you understand that this is a very important question for both the rights and the violations to the rights of the ethnic and linguistic groups. Is a very important issue. Why? Because the policies of the government of Iran are actually contributing and forcing the rise of this topic. We are sitting here today discussing the ethnic and the linguistic groups inside Iran because of a very important cause, and that cause emerged after 1979, and it was a deliberate policy. I would call it the militarization of citizens of neighboring countries of Iran. It was a deliberate policy of the government of Iran to militarize the Shia citizens of neighboring countries. The policy of meddling in neighbors and using the citizens of neighboring countries, arm them, organize them, create local chapters of Hezbollah and other groups. This policy would have ultimately, it's been almost 2 decades or more, actually 3 decades now, of this policy being followed in Iran, and it has naturally, 3 decades later, naturally has led us to this point. I would not have imagined anyone discussing the ethnic groups and linguistic groups in Iran, I would say 3 decades, early 80s, even early 90s, because no one really paid attention to really what ethnic groups and what nations lived inside Iran. It was not an issue. It has become an issue because Tehran followed a policy of militarizing segments of populations in neighboring countries, in Bahrain, in Kuwait, in Iraq, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, and of course now in Syria. And interestingly, even in a country that is, even in countries, actually not one country, but even in countries that are not immediate neighbors of Iran, comes to mind Yemen, comes to mind Nigeria, comes to my mind Malaysia. I mean, these are countries that are not immediate neighbors, not even geostrategic neighbors, I mean, with the exception, to an extent, of Yemen. Nigeria and Malaysia are 2 examples where Iran's diplomatic missions and Iranian diplomats have been either expelled or severely contained or restrained because of what the governments of those 2 countries saw as attempts by the government of Iran to militarize the citizens of these 2 countries. So, by virtue of Iran following a policy of militarizing citizens of neighboring countries, it was understandable that at some point in time in the future, the question of Iran's own treatment of groups of populations, minorities, ethnic and linguistic groups within Iran. due to some events today. But I went through some 2 or 3 very interesting pictures. I saw a picture of the Shah of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, sitting in a very relaxed moment with the rulers of the Gulf states. And the picture was somewhere in the 1960s. Coincidentally, Shah Reza Pahlavi was in Riyadh. He was sitting with the former king of Saudi Arabia. He had a couple of other emirs from other Gulf states as well. And it was a very informal sitting. The picture was not a formal picture. I'm sure it was not released formally by any government at that time. It's now available, of course, online. I was just examining the lack of tension, how unique that picture looks now, considering the current conditions. I remind you of one more thing, one more very interesting picture. The second wife, I think, if my information is not correct, the second wife of Reza Pahlavi was an Egyptian princess from the Egyptian ruling family, the younger sister of King Farouk of Egypt. And again, when I read the story of how the emperor, the Shah of Iran, reached out to a king of an Arab country, despite cultural, linguistic differences, despite the usual talk about Arab-Persian competition, despite the fact that the ruling family of Iran were Shia Muslims and the ruling family of Egypt were Sunni Muslims. All of these things never came in the way. And the ruling family of Iran reached out to the ruling family of Egypt, and they were united in this through this marriage. These quick examples and pictures that I saw basically tells you one thing. It tells you that before 1979, Iran actually was, the Iranian government was actually quite good at reaching out beyond these divisions of language and ethnicity and sect and religion. And they managed to integrate the various ethnicities and the various linguistic groups in Iran. The divisions became sharper after 1979. They are the sharpest today. There is no question that if the government of Iran is going to recruit citizens of other countries, specifically neighboring countries, militarize those citizens, and then use them for strategic adventures, such as the one in Syria and elsewhere, it is inevitable that at some point other countries, other interest groups would seize the opportunity to exploit Iran's own very serious internal divisions. I would just conclude by saying it's very important to remember that during the monarchy in Iran, Iranian people, the government succeeded in integrating the people to a great extent. It reached out to its neighbors, all of them, without considering ethnicity, culture, sect, religion. But after 1979, not only the government of Iran militarized segments of the population of neighboring countries, but this policy is now coming back to haunt Iran itself. And that's why we're sitting here today discussing the question of the violations of the ethnic and linguistic groups in Iran. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much for this fabulous introduction to political dimensions of the situation in Iran and interethnic and interreligious interaction. And let me just remind you that under international law, who are the minorities? They are under protection of the international law, and the government of Iran is committed to uphold those provisions, starting with the Universal Declaration on Human Rights and ICCPR and ICHR, the Bill of Rights. And when we look at international law, the minorities are adopted by the consensus in 1992 by all the UN member states. Minorities Declaration, United Nations Minority Declaration states that minorities as based on national or ethnic, cultural, religious, and linguistic identity, and provides that states should protect their existence. So therefore, we are discussing today that their rights, when their rights are violated, it's the responsibility of the state to make sure that they are protected and ensure respect for the rights of minority groups. Now let me pass the floor to our another colleague, Dirk Andriensens, Executive Committee of Brussels Tribunal. Dirk, please.
Good evening. It's already evening. I would like to focus on a bit the broader issue of Iran, because it's a very important subject within especially the progressive community. Iran is considered to be a progressive anti-imperialist country. Now, they play sort of double role, because in Iraq they have cooperated with the Americans. They have cooperated with the occupation. The Badr brigades and Mehdi army was integrated in the national police. That was the death squads of that were organized by the United States. So I find it difficult to explain that there is a general situation, geopolitical situation, where the United States is the most important enemy. But on the other hand, the Iraqis feel the heavy hand of Iranian intervention in their country. And I would like to say to those who think we cannot say anything about Iran because America is the main enemy, would like to start with what Stratfor said. It's a think tank, an American think tank, and they say the American strategy is fixed. Allow powers in the region to compete and balance against each other. When that fails, intervene with as little force and risk as possible. For example, the conflict between Iran and Iraq cancelled out two rising powers until the war ended. Then Iraq invaded Kuwait and threatened to overturn the balance of power in the region, and the result was Desert Storm. This strategy provides a model. In the Syria-Iraq region, the initial strategy is to allow the regional powers to balance each other. So, on the one hand, you have the USA, who's playing divide and rule in the region and try to cause as much animosity as possible. And on the other hand, Iran is also under attack from the Americans. If we look a little closer to the role of Iran in the region, we have to, I wanted to go to something that was said by I'm sorry, I have to find it, but it's an important Mohammed Ali Abtahi, Iran's deputy chairman for legal and parliamentary affairs, stated that the fall of Kabul and Baghdad would not have been easy without Iran's assistance. In doing so, he addressed the role of Iranian militias and intelligence services in Iraq and Afghanistan. And the result of that is that the Iranian threat is now imminent, and most of all pro-American authoritarian regimes in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan have helped to achieve that. Another thing about Iran being a so-called anti-imperialist country is, if we go back to 1979, Khomeini launched the slogan, "The road to Jerusalem goes through Baghdad." So that was a clear message to Saddam Hussein and the Iraqi government that Khomeini would be a very aggressive player in the region. He called on the Shiites, as what Mr. Qureshi said, he called on the Shia to conduct a holy war against all these heretic people, like Saddam Hussein was one. You must remember that during the Shah, there was a connection between the Israeli defense forces and the intelligence services and the Iranian intelligence services and defense forces. These contacts continued after 1979, even though Mr. Khomeini said that all connections with Israel and diplomatic connections would be broken. That didn't happen, and more so, Iran delivered weapons during the Iran-Iraq war to Iran through Israel, because, you know, the Phantoms airplanes were from America, from the United States, and the government in Baghdad thought that since America had not so good relationships with the new regime of the mullahs, that they would not be able to replace their weaponry. But they did through Israel. They obtained weapons, they obtained intelligence, and so it is a bit strange how Iran is being regarded as an anti-imperialist country. Of course, we have to look at the primer contradiction, but the second contradiction is also important, because that could become very, very important and a primary contradiction in the future. There's a lot more to say about the role of Iran in the region, but I think Mr. Qureshi also said a lot, and I'm finishing my intervention here.
Thank you very much, Dirk. I have to apologize on behalf of our two speakers. I'm afraid we are having some delays due to new registration system at UNOC, and if they don't participate, we will just finalize as planned at 4:30. And now let me pass the floor to Dr. Karen Parker, International Educational Project. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Gulnaz. It's an honor to be here. I've participated in many forums about the situation in Iran, and I am pleased to speak today. The original title was Violations on Non-Farsi People in Iran. I will talk about the Kurdish population in Iran, who have been subjected to extreme violations of human rights for many, many years. In particular, Iran has participated in the execution of many, many Kurdish. In 8 months, there have been more than 53 Kurds executed, higher than previously announced, because the family members are kept under surveillance and are not allowed to report. But in July and August in 2017, more than 40 Kurdish people were executed in Iran. Among the Kurds who were executed, 3 women have been killed with their husbands, and another had been executed with his daughter. Lokman and Zanir Moradi and Kamal Hussein Ramadan are now in danger because they are on deck for being executed. There are many Irani Kurds in jail. They have been in jail for many, many years. Some have written letters to the previous special rapporteurs for Iran, including Ahmed Shahid and Asma Jahangir. Ahmed Shahid did actually take up the situation of Irani Kurds. Previous rapporteurs had not in particular, but he did. Unfortunately, he was unable to stop the attacks on the Kurdish population in Iran. Asma Jahangir was just named the special rapporteur for Iran. She's very new. We expect her to also take up the situation of the Kurdish population. She has taken up the situation of the massacre of the opposition people, the PMOI, in Iran that occurred in 1988. So we expect she will take a broader picture, broader role in addressing the human rights situation in Iran. In June 2017, there has been a new phase of arrests and execution in Kurdistan and also in Baluchistan and Ahwaz. More than 800 Kurdish people in Iranian Kurdistan have now been arrested. This is a crisis situation. There is also the problem that the Irani government, I don't know quite how to say it, but they focus on the drug trade, and they are carrying out a policy of providing Kurdish Irani youth with drugs. And so there is a huge increase in the number of drug addictions of Kurdish youth in Irani Kurdistan. There are also trans-border incidences where people coming from other countries come into Kurdistan of Iran, and the government interferes or doesn't interfere depending on their usefulness as far as drugging the Irani Kurdish youth. My time is up? No, okay, okay. 5 Kurdish civilian people have been killed in the last 2 months because of implications that they helped in the trafficking of the goods. So the Irani government is playing a very negative game in Irani Kurdistan against the Irani Kurdish population. There have also been Kurdish student activists killed this year alone And the human rights situation in Irani Kurdistan and Baluchistan and Ahwaz is getting worse day to day. And Rouhani's period has not changed this at all. It has maintained, the Irani regime has maintained its pressure on the Irani population. The mother tongue is forbidden. There's practically no free press. There's no freedom of association. Every human rights violation that one can conceive of is taking place in Irani Kurdistan, but in fact the most serious situation remains the numbers of executions. I hope that this seminar revitalizes people here to pressure the new human rights special rapporteur for Iran so that she will take up the issue of the executions and other violations of the human rights of the Kurdish population in Irani Kurdistan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Parker, for this nice overview on the situation of Kurdish minority in Iran. Indeed, when it comes to death penalty, Iran ranks among the top executioner countries around the world. And unfortunately, the charges for the execution, drug charges, which does not meet the threshold of the most serious crimes under international law. Moreover, Iran government continues to disregard the prohibition and execute juvenile offenders, which is a clear violation of international law provisions. And now I will pass the floor to our last speaker, and we will take questions after that. Mr. Fayez Soleimani is from Ahwaz Organization for the Defense of Human Rights.
أصحاب السعادة، نحن في المنظمة الأحوازية للدفاع عن حقوق الإنسان نرى أن من واجبنا أن نلفت انتباهكم إلى أوضاع حقوق الإنسان في إقليم الأحواز العربي والأقاليم التابعة للشعوب غير الفارسية في عموم إيران، عاملين أن تسهم جهودنا في إيصال معاناة شعبنا والشعوب الغير الفارسية في ظل استبداد الدولة الإيرانية إلى مسامع كل المنظمات والهيئات المعنية بالشأن الإنساني في العالم. وعليه فإننا نؤكد أولاً بأن تجاوزات الدولة الإيرانية في انتهاك حقوق الإنسان في شتى مناحي الحياة وبصورة ممنهجة في الأحواز وباقي المناطق التي نعمل على تغطيتها أكبر من أن نحيط بها بإمكانياتنا التي لا تتناسب وحجم هذه الانتهاكات. ولكننا على قناعة بأن النظر اليسير من جرائم هذه الدولة كافي لتحريك الضمير الإنساني في العالم للاهتمام بأوضاع ضحايا تجاوزات السلطات الإيرانية في هدر الحقوق المقدسة للإنسان على نطاق واسع في داخل الدولة الإيرانية. ومن المفارقات التي تدعو إلى الحيرة هو أن هذه التجاوزات زادت وتيرتها واتسعت رقعتها بعد الاتفاق النووي الإيراني بين الدولة الإيرانية والمجتمع الدولي، وكأن الاتفاق جاء ليطلق يد إيران في ارتكاب المزيد من الجرائم ويعطيها الحصانة من أي مسائلة عن جرائمها. ولم يدرك المتضررون من الدولة الإيرانية ونحن معهم بأن الاتفاق المشؤوم يتضمن إعطاء الضوء الأخضر لهذه الدولة في انتهاك حقوق الإنسان كما تشاء في عموم جغرافيتها وخاصة في إقليم الأحواز العربي. فبدلا من تقوم إيران مع مرور الزمن بتحسين سجلها الأسود في مجال حقوق الإنسان وخاصة حقوق المحتقلين السياسيين في سجونها، نجدها وقد توسعت انتهاكاتها بحقهم. وعلى سبيل المثال لا الحصر أصدرت مؤخرا محاكم إيران حكم الإعدام ضد ناشطين 2 من أبناء الأحواز في 31 أغسطس لهذا العام، أي قبل 19 يوما، وهم عبد الله عباس وقاسم عبيد من أهالي مدينة شاور في جنوب الأحواز بعد خطفهما في 21 أكتوبر لعام 2015. ومنذ الاعتقال حتى صدور الحكم لم يسمح لعوائلهما بالزيارة، بل لم يسمح لهما بحق تعيين محامين للدفاع عنهم قانونيا، لا لجرم ارتكباه، وإنما لإصرارهما على النشاط ومواجهة إيران سلميا دفاعا عن الحقوق المدنية والاجتماعية والسياسية للشعب العربي الأحوازي. وهذا هو نهج إيران في بسط سيطرتها على الأحوازيين والشعوب غير الفارسية، يتجلى في الحرمان من الحقوق السياسية والتضييق عليهم أمنيا واقتصاديا وقانونيا. واكتظت سجون إيران بكل فئات الشعب الذين قاوموا الظلم ونادوا بالحقوق: صحفيين، سياسيين، طلاب، عمال، فلاحين، نساء، شيوخ، أطفال، بأساليب مروعة: اختطاف بدل توجيه مذكرة احتقال، عدم الإفصاح عن مصير المحتقلين قبل صدور الأحكام، نزع الاحترافات بالتعذيب، والحرمان من حق تعيين المحامين إلا في حالات نادرة. الحضور الكريم، ننقل لكم جزء من الرسالة الصوتية للأسير أو السجين السياسي الأحوازي ماهر الكعبي من السجن المركزي في محافظة أردبيل شمال إيران، والتي نشرت في 24 أغسطس من هذا العام، أي قبل 26 يوما. وهو يطالب باسمه وباسم زملائه الأسرى الأحوازيين في المحتقلات الإيرانية من منظمة الأمم المتحدة والمجلس العالمي لحقوق الإنسان والاتحاد الأوروبي ومن كل المنظمات المعنية بحقوق الإنسان في العالم بالتضامن معهم لرفع الظلم عنهم كمحتقلين وتمكينهم من التمتع بحقهم في العدالة. وكما يؤكد على حق الطبيعي لشعبه في المطالبة بحقوقه سلميا، مناشدا المسؤولة الأممية المعنية بحقوق الإنسان في إيران السيدة عاصمة جهانغير بالضغط على الحكومة الإيرانية لفتح التحقيق المحايد في عمليات التعذيب والانتهاكات التي تتم بحق السجناء السياسيين داخل سجون الدولة الإيرانية، وخاصة المباعدين من ديارهم، والعمل على منحهم حقهم في المحاكمات العادلة. وعلمنا أن المخابرات الإيرانية تخضع الأسير ماهر الكعبي لتحقيق قاسي عقابا له على رسالته الصوتية التي وجهها إليكم وإلى كل المعنيين بقضايا حقوق الإنسان، وإن محكمة الثورة الإيرانية سوف تنظر في نتائج هذه التحقيقات كقضية منفصلة عن قضيته الأولى. وبما أن الرسالة قد وصلت، فهو على يقين بأنكم جميعا لن تهملوا قضية
and we hope that you will first concentrate on finding his whereabouts and insist on studying the situation of all detainees, and do not stop by detainees, but please, you have to also consider all other violations against all international instruments, the violations of the United Nations Charter, of the UNESCO, which commits countries to protect and promote human rights of its citizens, to provide general education and to combat illiteracy, to provide health services. However, 7 days ago, Iran transformed a school which was a primary school in the revolution quarter to become a center for intelligence. This Arab area has become now void of a school for its children. Ladies and gentlemen, in addition to the crimes that I have mentioned, there is the crimes against the environment. Water is polluted, water is scarce, people do not have adequate potable water, and populations are being deprived of adequate water for political and social reasons, as well as economic, which is water is needed for agriculture and for irrigation. This is for collective punishment against the Ahwazi people. This threatens deleterious consequences against the people and increased unemployment, as well as the fact that there is a kind of apartheid policy, which means that the Arab populations are not welcomed in the workforce. In addition to the environmental damage, there is desertification, there is the migration from the rural to the urban. There are statistics that show that more than 30,000 Ahwazi have migrated from the south of Ahwaz within 5 years only. This is also the situation of other towns and villages. In other words, now Iran has also practiced ethnic cleansing and forced migration in the
أشرت إليها هنا بعجالة قد لا تشكل 5% من مجمل انتهاكات إيران لحقوق الإنسان في الأحواز، والتي تعاني منها الشعوب غير الفارسية أيضا على امتداد إيران، والذين يشكلون السواد الأعظم من سكان هذه الجغرافيا، بينما تختلف الظروف والأحوال في مناطق الأقلية الفارسية التي انفردت بالسلطة على حساب الأكثرية السكانية. مطالب هذه الشعوب تتلخص في إتاحة الفرصة في امتلاك حق تقرير المصير، الحق في إنشاء وتكوين منظمات غير حكومية، حق تشكيل أحزاب سياسية، حق التعليم بلغة الأم، حق اختيار الدين، حق التعبير وغيرها من الحقوق المكفولة قانونيا. وعلى هذا نتمنى أن لا تختم اجتماعات ومؤتمرات هذه الدورة من مجلس الأمم المتحدة إلا ببيان إدانة شديدة اللهجة ضد انتهاكات إيران لحقوق الشعوب غير الفارسية، وأيضا للضغط على إيران للسماح للمنظمات الحقوقية الدولية لزيارة السجون والاطلاع على وضع السجناء السياسيين الذين صدرت بحقهم أحكام بالإعدام والسجن لمدة طويلة بمحاكمات غير عادلة، بالإضافة إلى الاطلاع إلى الوضع الإنساني المتأزم في الأحواز ومناطق الشعوب غير الفارسية. مع علمنا في المنظمة الأحوازية للدفاع عن حقوق الإنسان أنه لا يمكن لأي إجراء لا يتفق مع رغبة الشعب الأحوازي أن يحسن من وضع حقوق الإنسان في الأحواز إلا بإنهاء الاحتلال الإيراني وتشكيل الدولة الأحوازية. فإننا نطالب أن ينظر إلى الواقع الذي يعيشه شعبنا في ظل الاحتلال الإيراني له بعين الإنصاف والموضوعية.
Thank you very much for that voice from the ground. We appreciate a lot your presence today and sharing this information with us. We have 5 minutes left for questions. I'm really sorry about it, but before that I would like to draw your attention to the report of the Geneva International Center for Justice on Human Rights Violations in Iran. We will be distributing it now, and we can also find it online on the web page of the GICJ. Now, please, if you have questions to speakers, first questions, please, gentlemen, backwards, 2, start 1, 2.
First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers, and I thank the speakers. In fact, the violations against the Ahwaz population are not something strange for the Iranian terrorism. But the problem is that these violations that are perpetrated against the Ahwaz people is under the occupation of Iran to the Ahwaz territories and the torture and the execution. We do not hear any voice from international NGOs in relation to these violations. These violations are grave and extreme. What Iran is doing against the Ahwaz people is the same as done by the Iranian militias against Arabs in Syria, Iraq, and in Yemen. On the issue of imperialism, as the Dr. Drake said, this is a big lie that Iran is doing. Actually, they do not have animosity against the West. Khomeini said that the road to Jerusalem goes through Baghdad, and then after him, people in Iran came and they said that it goes through Damascus and Homs and Sana'a and Aden in order to destroy the Arab region. And they managed actually through their militias to destroy the Arab region and to fracture it because of these fake slogans. Before I conclude with a question, I'd like to confirm here that there is very strong relationship between ISIS, Iran, and Hezbollah. ISIS is the true face of Hezbollah, or the second face of it. They are one coin that was minted by Iran, and everyone knows what happened in Syria and Lebanon recently. We have seen a month ago what happened in Lebanon, the agreement between ISIS and Hezbollah, and how they managed to have an agreement that has become declared now. It was secret before. The question that raises itself, why international organizations are silent towards the terrorism of Iran against the Ahwaz population, and why international human rights groups are silent about the role of Iran in creating these terrorist organizations such as ISIS and others, and why there is international collusion with Iran to allow it to practice terror in the Arab region.
To respond? I think we can take only this question. I'm afraid I've been reminded that we have to close and we leave the room in 2 minutes. So if any of the speakers
just very quickly.
Yes, please.
I'll answer in English. You're basically asking why and how, why the Iranian government is not criticized internationally for its violations. I would just answer by saying you have to take into consideration that the Iranian clergymen, the men of religion, the ayatollahs, are probably the smartest mullahs ever. They have, they've created their network through their diplomacy, despite being very anti-American, as Derek just mentioned. They also cooperated with the Americans in Afghanistan and Iraq and elsewhere. They're very smart in this. So you need to commend them, actually, by the way they manage their international relations, and they've maintained relationships that have and they were able to dodge any kind of scrutiny into their record, which is horrendous, basically. But they did it, and they succeeded. And I often speak to, for example, people who are close to the Taliban in Afghanistan and other extremist and religious groups, and these groups did not succeed, but the religious group, the extremist movement that was launched by Imam Khomeini succeeded, not only in establishing a state and a government, but continuing for almost 40 years. It's a success, and managing the diplomatic relations very successfully. Thank you.
I think on that concluding remark, we will finish the event. Thank you very much for your participation. If you have more questions, maybe you can approach the speakers in person. Thank you for your attendance.